Today, I have a very special guest, Angie Carlson, joining me. And Angie is actually the founder and CEO of her own coaching financial business called Carlson Financial Coaching. And super excited to have you on the podcast, the Living Life with Wendy podcast today, Angie. And as always, I love when we get an opportunity to share our stories as women in business. So let me start by asking you, can you share with my audience today your journey to becoming an entrepreneur?
Yes, thank you, Wendy. I can absolutely share my story. And thank you for having me on today. So my story has actually been in the making for a while. It really kind of started around 2016, 2017, when we were just kind of struggling with our finances, and just the juggling wasn't working, doing the math wasn't working, the budget wasn't working. And then at the end of 2017, my husband and I were just like, you know what, we're fed up. We're going to get rid of this debt. And we just don't know how we're going to do it. We're going to do it. That change 107 days later allowed us to have all of our consumer debt paid off. So now we were debt free, but the mortgage. So that was pretty empowering to be like, wow, we just didn't really shift our budget. We shifted our mindset around our money, and then things happened. And I'm a math major. I'm a total nerd. So that was like kind of out there for me. And, we kept kind of going on our plan. I didn't really think about coaching as an option until I had a near-death experience in September 2019. I'm okay now. But as I was laying there, not knowing if I was going to have a surgery, make it or not, the whole time in my mind was just like, you knew you could have helped people, you didn't. You knew you could have done this and you didn't. You let your fear stop you. And I just decided in that moment, like, if I survive this, I'm not going to be back on my deathbed with these thoughts. That's just not going to work. So still took me a little bit of time before I got my coaching certification, became a coach, left my day job, and then focused on my coaching full time. So that's the very nutshell version of the story.
Well, and I love, quite often we talk about no regrets in life, right? And not many of us have like the near-death experience that is a pivotal moment in our lives to sort of ask ourselves that question. So thank you for sharing. That's so vulnerable of you, first of all. And if anyone in my audience is like sort of connecting to that, right? I can say there's a lot of times in my life where it was micro moments of like, I don't want to have regret. And I think what we should really impress on here is like, let's not wait till we get to that stage, right? To make the difference. Now, you also mentioned that like you went from like you were able to go debt free, right? Other than your mortgage. And so, and you said it was around your mindset. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I can. So with the mindset, it was more of my husband and me coming together and really realizing what's important to us, what isn't important to us, how bad do we even want this goal? And then making our decisions accordingly to free up the money that we could, cut the expenses we could, and just really be cognizant of where literally every single dollar was coming into the household so that we could really be like, okay, this is our goal. This is our future. How bad do we want it? And if we want it bad enough, we're going to align our finances with it. And so it was just the teamwork and the coming together that ended up being so much more important than trying to wrestle over the budget going, well, the budget just doesn't work. I'm just going to give up.
So making deliberate changes, it sounds like.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Deliberate changes, intentionality, knowing what was important, knowing what we would sacrifice, knowing what we didn't sacrifice, and just really coming together and being really grounded in that.
Okay. I love that. So, before you became an entrepreneur, what was, I call it, I don't like calling it the day job. What was the job before you sort of like pulled the trigger on entrepreneurship?
Yeah, the last full-time job I had is I was a financial aid director for colleges in the United States. So,
okay, so helping students kind of figure out how to afford their education.
It's not only affording the education, how do they even apply for aid? What does it look like? Putting the aid package together, because no two packages are the same, plus within the laws and regulations that we were allowed to operate in.
Okay, so it sounds like there was something in you already that was like a servant leader for sure, because you were helping others in that part of their journey in life. So what was the trigger for you? What prompted you to sort of say, okay, I'm ready now to jump from the corporate world into entrepreneurship?
So what was ready for me is I just kind of a couple of things. One, I just had this nagging feeling that I was just meant for more. And two, after becoming debt free, student loans is a huge issue in the United States. And we could do a whole nother podcast on that. But the student loan crisis, just with the borrowing and all that. And as a director, the laws really hindered what I could and could not say. So I was just kind of like, I can't really serve in the way that I know people are meant to be served. I go home and I just feel completely unfulfilled because I'm contributing to the problem that I want to solve on a daily basis. And it just was eating at me. And even though the company I worked for was great, the people I worked with were fantastic, that nagging just wouldn't go away. And I'm like, you know what? There's a reason it's not going away, and I need to listen to it.
Yeah. And that's a really interesting point you just made, right? It's like, as entrepreneurs, and I hear this a lot with the people I coach too, there's something in you, like you call it a nagging, right? You hear this voice and, when is it okay? Or when do we finally start to listen to what the voice is saying? And sometimes it takes getting rid of the other noise in our heads, which is sometimes our corporate job, right? And just like the day-to-day, keep the lights on in our lives, to open up that space to start listening.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. And part of the way of cleaning your head is with the finances, because when your finances are, you're drowning in debt, you don't know where it's going to come from, your options just feel so much more limited. It's not that they are limited. It's just, well, I may not want to take this type of cut because I'm worried about these bills. I don't want to take this leap because I need the income to pay off the debt. And that's one of the reasons I love helping couples become debt free. And because most people, when they think of their ideal shared financial future, they're not thinking, I want to be loaded up with debt and just working to pay that for the rest of my life. If that's your ideal financial future, great. For most of us, we're thinking, maybe travel, beach, time with family. And it can be hard to give yourself the space to do that when you have the debt, because the mental thoughts of the debt go with you everywhere you go. You don't get to turn off your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And I failed to mention that. And you mentioned it, that you work specifically with couples, right? In working with them to help them with their financial goals and achieving their, I guess, in my season of life, I would call it financial freedom and planning for retirement. But I think that there's also younger couples who struggle with finances as well, especially if they're burdened with student debt and all of the other things that come post their secondary education. Right. So I think that's, I want to ask more questions around that, but I still want to keep focused on your journey. So, you said financial debt can really hold you back from, taking that leap into entrepreneurship. So how did you prepare for that transition of like working in the corporate world into, becoming the CEO of your life?
Yeah. So one of the ways we prepared is we just piled up a lot of cash, which is easy to do when you don't have debt. So we just saved and prepared, and we knew like, okay, how many months of expenses do we want in the bank to feel good? My husband was still working, so we knew we had his income. So it was just like, okay, what do we think we need for the transition? And then whatever we thought we need, we multiplied it by more, because what you think you need is usually never enough for what you need. And then we just saved. And then we're like, okay, so let's say we do this journey and things start happening financially. At what point do we go to our backup plans for income supplementing? So it wasn't that we were taking our eyes off the prize. We were trying to balance being realistic with whatever we do. We don't want the dream to sink us. We were not taking on debt because that was just going to add a level of risk that neither one of us wanted. And so, okay, what does this look like to us? And for us, there wasn't really a wrong answer. It's just, how do we do it so that we keep our emotions at bay and we can really focus on the journey ahead? Because when you're starting a business and then you're stressed about, where's my next client coming from? How am I going to eat? you just show up very different in your business. And I knew I did not want that for myself.
Okay. Okay. I'm writing all of this down because I think you said so many important things in that, in that moment is, you did mention you might have a backup plan, right? So there was maybe a plan B.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, the plan B was, even if I need to do temp work, like supplement my income, maybe cover a 6-week maternity leave, like nothing like long term, but like, what are the things that we can do if we need to get cash in or something comes up? Like my house, we don't use credit cards. So like a lot of the traditional options that people are like, I'll just put it on a credit card, I'll do this. We choose not to use that. And so now, but we have to also think differently about, okay, if that challenge comes up, what are we going to do about it? And we have 2 sons at home. Kids are kids, things happen, things aren't going to go to plan. So not that we can mitigate everything that's going to go wrong, but how do we try to at least have a theme of mitigation? So like, for example, once our emergency fund hit a certain dollar amount, I need to be looking for another job. Once it gets below a lower dollar amount, I need to be finding something tomorrow. And that's just more of, we don't wait till everything goes to zero and then crap, now what do we do? No, we stay ahead of it.
Okay. So like what I'm hearing is setting realistic sort of triggers, right? That trigger action if needed.
Right.
That's really good advice because I think sometimes our ego or our desire to succeed in our own business kind of holds us back from listening, right? Or seeing the signs. Like you said, it's not okay to get to zero. You had certain, I guess, thresholds that you set for yourself as a couple and said, hey, if we hit that, then this is our plan or this is my plan. And I think that's great advice for people.
Thank you.
For sure. It's so funny because I was just coaching someone the other day and their one source of income has ended and they were really worried, right? They're losing sleep over it. And I said, well, everything's figure outable, first of all, to coin a phrase. But like you can hang on to ego and go, oh no, I'm going to stick to my plan and I'm not going to give up my dream. But it's not about all or nothing, right? It's about, I can have it all, but I might have to take a detour along the way. And that's what entrepreneurship is all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, it's interesting, Angie, you mentioned like you guys were able to pay down debt, right? And you don't use credit cards. And I think that my listeners, I think their ears just perked up when you said that, because I think in today's economy, we really struggle with that. So, how did you manage that? And did you always were you always credit card free? Like, I'm just curious because I think my listeners would want to know.
I was never always credit card free. When I was younger in my 20s, I was the person who I charged it and paid it off every month. And then I had a month I couldn't pay it off. And it took me 3 years to get out. And I'm like, this sucks, never again.
Okay.
And then about a decade later, we had one just for medical expenses. And then about 7 years ago, we got rid of that one. And we haven't had a credit card in probably 7, 8 years. Yeah. A lot of people think we were totally nuts for not having a credit card, and we would not change a thing.
Well, and I think it takes, like you said, you already had that discipline in your life. You had that financial hygiene and that mindset to not run debt with credit cards. Right. And I think it's so easy. Like if I could go back 20 years ago and speak to my younger self, right. It would be different. And I think too, there's a mindset that if you don't have a credit card, like how do you travel? So how do you get past those things? How do you travel? How do you rent a car? How do you do all of those things without a credit card?
Yep. Renting a car is normally they take out an extra deposit, which we just know for that and plan for it. And then when we turn the car back in, we get our deposit back. So that's not a big deal. And traveling is just a call to the bank to be like, hey, we're going to be here, here, and here these days. These charges can go through. And so, there is a little extra communication, but the beauty of it is everything hits our account right away. There's no 30-day delay on getting a bill. And so like the temptation to overspend really goes away when everything is coming out of your account. And I don't want to say real time, but like within 24 to 48 hours versus, I've got this card, I'm charging it. And okay, what did I put on it today? What went on it yesterday? What else do I still need to put on it? When does that bill come? Did I get the bill in? Did I pay it? To us, it just eliminates so much stress from our life. And outside our mortgage, we have no debt, and we're not fans of borrowing money. So we're not concerned about, let's worry about, in the United States, credit scores are a big deal. We don't borrow money. What do I need a credit score for?
Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense, right? So I'm assuming like flights, any travel, that's like a debit charge, right? Because now you can do that with online charges with a debit card. So it's just like, I'm thinking through this process, because for someone who has that mindset that they must have a credit card to do, like, to live life and travel and do all the things. I mean, you just debunked that. Like, it is possible to do all of those things without a credit card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just to have the peace of mind knowing that as soon as we charge stuff, it's paid for. Like, I don't have to worry about, did this go through? Did that go through? What's this bill? Like, for us, it just eliminates a huge source of stress. And
that's so cool. Yeah. And I like that you said that you did have to work through that at one point in your life, and that you are managing that, because, I want to give my listeners like hope that is possible. Right. So now let's talk about your business a little bit more. Right. So when you think about how your journey unfolded, you mentioned like you had a plan, right? You had like saved up some money to execute your plan, live your dream. So tell us a little bit about sort of like how you got started. Like, how do you get those clients, right? Because you are a financial coach. So obviously you're working with people. And, what are some of the tips that you would give to someone who is looking at building a service-based business like you have?
Yeah. So the first tip that I was the most valuable is there is a lot that you don't know. You think you know it, and you really don't. And be open to accepting help from people who are way smarter than you in those areas, because no one is meant to be the expert on everything. There's a reason our doctors are not mechanics. So just be open to help, number one. Two, when you're looking to invest in the help, make sure that you vet them well, thoroughly, and you follow up and make sure that they've helped others get the results that you want to achieve. Because as a coach, I invest in coaching myself. And I know for me, like, I am responsible for my results. I want to make sure my guide is the right person to get me there. And they're not going to do the work for me. I still need to do the work. I need to know myself well enough to go, okay, what do I truly need from this coach? Do they recognize the same things that I think I need? And then great, let's go and get there. And I've been fortunate to be blessed with some amazing coaches that have really opened my eyes along the way. And my other one was, I never said no to a conversation building my business early on. And those conversations now, even to this day, are still translating into referral leads. Some of those referrals are turning into clients. So it's just, in the beginning, it didn't, like, I work with money, and like, if someone, like, I had a voiceover actor that's like, let's have a conversation. I'm like, okay, even though you think financial coach and voiceover actor have nothing in common, I don't know what that person's financial situation's like. Who am I to judge? So let's just open the door and have just tons and tons of conversations, just see where those nuggets are and go under and unfold them. And then, of course, my social media, work on strategy, posting, those comments coming in as well. So there's a lot of different approaches to it, but those are the big ones.
Yeah, I love what you said. Like, don't say no to a conversation, because I think sometimes we get so busy in the work. I'm a fellow entrepreneur, right? So that when people approach you, sometimes you're like, yeah, I don't really need that right now in my business. Like, I'll give you an example. So just recently, I changed my platform provider for my website. And back in the fall of 2022, like, I was really happy with what I was using. But for some reason, I just had the conversation, and it did lead to me changing my provider. And it was because, there was a couple of things that were involved, but you're right. Like, sometimes we say no before we really say, hey, like, all it takes is time to listen. You're only spending time, nothing else. And ultimately, you have the power to say yes or no at the end of the conversation.
Correct.
Yeah, I love that attitude. And I think that as entrepreneurs, we need to listen to that more often, right? Because I think there's always that fear of no in our own minds when we're going for the ask, because I think the the action of actually asking for clients can hold us back. I'm sure you've talked to your coaches about that.
Yeah.
So is that like, how did you get your first client? Why don't you share that with my listeners? Because I think that first step is the hardest to take as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So I actually got my first client from Facebook. Mutual friends of ours had shared a post of, she was a coach and she coached on mindset. And at the time I knew my mindset, oh boy, did my mindset need some work. And so I was just probably bolder than I thought I should have been. It was just like, hey, I would love your help with this. And then just so you know, this is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. And then she was like, you could help me with the finances too. So in a way, it was almost like a swap.
Okay.
She coached me on mindset. I coached her on finances. But at the time I was just like, I got my first client. Oh my gosh, I actually created a client. So that was a really big milestone for me.
You make a good point, because once you get the win, you want to keep winning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You keep taking more shots because you're like, woohoo. So what happened next? You've been in business for, you said since 2016
No, 2021 was when I started. And then I left my job April 2022 and then really focused on it, because when I was very, very part-time, I wasn't even 5 hours a week coaching. So I was just so it's really ramped up in the last 13, 14 months.
Okay. So what has led to your success then in the last 13, 14 months for you?
Just getting really consistent. And this is something my business coach pounded into my head, was consistency. I was ready to move on. And it's like, no, you're not. And I'm sitting here going, I have to keep being I'm doing the same thing over and over again. I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again. But I was like, you know what? I hired an expert, trust the expert. And that's just led to other opportunities, conversations, establishing different lead sources, really knowing, oh, there is an opportunity here. Let me take it. Where before I'd been like, oh, okay, that's a great story. And it's like, oh, no, wait, I can dive into maybe that little part of the story and see if there's something else further that maybe I can help with. And just learning how to spot things that I didn't even think were available to me.
Okay. So give us some examples with that, because I think that's really interesting. And when you talk about consistency, are you referring to social media specifically, like showing up consistently?
Showing up on social media, consistency, establishing my routine of when I show up. And then in terms of social media, if someone will comment, write a comment, and it seems like, you read it at face value and you're like, okay, great. It's like, maybe there's more there than what face value is.
Okay. So for those guys who resist social media, it's really about the interaction too, right? It's not just about being consistent, but when people do comment, making sure that you're connecting.
Yes. And then, commenting back, really engaging. And you can do this a conversation too. So if someone would just come to me and be like, oh, I really hate this payment in my life. Okay. For me, that's there's something there that I need to explore. So it's just knowing what to listen for. And I think that's one of the biggest things I didn't know that I know now is what specifically do I need to be listening for? What are my ideal clients saying? Because they don't say, my client's not going to say something the way I say it. Mm-hmm. And so so then it was really focusing on, okay, how do I get my messaging and my post to really be okay, how do they say the problem? So they say the problem is, I make a lot of money and I'm still broke. Mm. That's how they identify it. Okay. That's how I need to identify it.
Got it. I love that. So, in your bio that you shared with me, you specifically help couples. And it sounds like couples be that powerful team, right? Mm-hmm. That helps them on their journey and helps them communicate around money. So what are some of the tips that you could share with my listeners on how we could improve our communication around finances, specifically in a partnership, in a couple?
Yeah. So the biggest one is never assume your spouse has the same financial experiences as you, because they grew up in a totally different home with different settings. And think about the things in your life that you don't want people to see. What happened in their house as a child that they don't want to see that is coming out in your money? Because I cannot tell you how many times that I see decisions from childhood that were just picked up on. They don't even recognize that they're doing it, that now are impacting their marriage today. That is just a source of stress and tension. And how do we bring those stories? How do we bring that together? And when people look at like, oh, they might say my spouse spends too much, and then it turns into a fight about the money or a really heated conversation. The money is only a symptom. So the money is never the problem. It's just because money, if you take a dollar bill and you lay it down for 2 hours and you come back, that dollar bill's there. It only moves if you tell it to move. So the question you need to answer is, why is this money being told to move here?
So what's the why behind the action?
Yeah. And it could be a whole host of things.
Yeah. It's funny that you said like sometimes like, because we don't know, right? When you said sometimes it could be the mess of whatever happened in the past or the sort of like whatever happened. And my mind, and I don't know if my listeners did too, went right to my message drawer in my kitchen, right? We all have maybe not all of us, a good amount of us have that message drawer. And it's like our drawer where we give ourselves permission just to throw all the junk and hide it away from the rest of the world. So understanding the junk in our lives, it sounds like, can help us have a better financial relationship with finances.
Right. And it's also, patterns that you've seen. So like if you see a pattern where every, package that gets delivered is hidden, and your spouse wasn't raised in a house like that, they're going to be upset that you're hiding packages, and you're going to be like, well, this is just normal. What are they so mad about? Exactly. And it seems like a very oversimplistic example, but there's so many things like that go on where, it's, or maybe a major decision's made, but one spouse wasn't consulted, and they're like, maybe they had different goals for whatever you were working on, but they weren't shared as effectively as they could have been. And now someone's really disappointed, they're hurt. And money is just the cause of, divorce, relationship breakdowns. And that's a lot. And it doesn't need to be that way.
Money's the symptom. And it sounds like the communication is the biggest opportunity, and feeling safe and comfortable communicating around money is a big thing for people.
It is, because then when you put your spending plan together, you both actually want to follow it.
Right.
Because if you feel heard and you feel loved and where like this is for the best part of your journey in your marriage, now you're looking at this from a place of excitement of, I can't wait to do this, instead of, oh, I'm being restrained, so I'm just going to throw it out the window and do what I want anyway. And that teamwork is just so crucial.
Okay. So I'm hearing some big things here, because this isn't really about the money. This is like the money is the outcome, right? So when you coach your couples, are you focused on that communication piece and how they can come together and be aligned with their financial goals? And like, is part of that journey with your client improving that communication? Because I think it would fall apart no matter what they would agree on if they're not aligned.
Right. And that's why my coaching program starts with that communication, because a lot of financial coaches are like, well, let's just start with the budget. I'm here going, my budget didn't work for a decade. If I went to a financial coach and they're like, let's start with the budget, I'm like, I'm dealing with my biggest frustration for a decade first. Why do I even want that? Yeah. So it just didn't make a lot of sense to me to do that. But yet if we start as like, okay, we know, like, because more likely if you're reaching out to a financial coach, there's something not working. Whenever you reach out to any type of coach, there's something not working the way you want it to. And they might come in and say the budget, but then as you dig and you probe, it's always deeper than what's initially said. So how do we get to start working on that so that we can reintroduce some tools that can be really effective in helping you get on the journey? But that perspective shift and that communication change needs to happen first, because if you're making a budget and one of the spouses doesn't want to stop hiding purchases, your budget does you no good. Of course you're going to be frustrated and stressed. It's not working. So that communication part to me is that comes even before we really even dig into numbers and dig into the finances, because until we know what's going on from a communication perspective, that has, my opinion, we have to have progress going there before we even start on the actual dollars and cents of it.
Yeah. And I'm discovering through this interview, Angie, that's what differentiates you, right? From a financial planner or an accountant or a bookkeeper or whatever you want to put that hat on, is that you're looking at the inner, like the human drive, that inner thing in each of your clients, so that you can get them committed to like working on their finances.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. I don't know how many people do what you do. This is the first time I've ever talked to someone that is actually a financial coach. And I think that's the difference, right? Is that's why the word coach is in your title and in your business.
Correct. Because I am not licensed to do anything. And honestly, I'm not licensed for like wills, taxes, insurance. And I don't want to be. To me, I think of myself as the house foundation. And if you were going to go to a builder, even if you knew nothing about building a house, if they told you they were installing the windows or putting on the roof first, I would really hope you would question their ability to help you build a house. And the reason I would hope you'd question that is that you can look at a house and say, this doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that goes on with our money, except we don't stop here to think, well, this doesn't make any sense. You're just like, oh, okay, people said to do it this way, so I'm just going to do it. Where you could have 50 people tell you that, yeah, let's install the roof on the house first. And you're going to look at a house, go, I don't think so.
Yeah, because that's logical. But when it comes to money, we just want the fix, right? We just want to figure out how to fix it. And we're not looking at the root cause.
Not only fix it, you want a magic wand. So like if you have all this debt, you just want it to disappear, which more than likely you didn't acquire all your debt overnight. You're not going to dig out overnight either. Yeah. So the expectations we have set for our money are just unrealistic with that. And then, the coming together, and then as a couple, you got another person. So you really need to get everyone on the same page and together and just come along for the journey and really work on it, because the result's worth it. I mean, working together as a team and you're eliminating your financial stress. Like, what does that do for your marriage? Yeah. What does that do for the quality of your marriage, the quality of your home life, coming home every day, sleeping next to somebody in your bed who's your teammate and not someone that's like, oh, I wonder how they're going to screw up my life today.
Yeah. I like that. How are they going to screw up my life today? Yeah. And yes. And yes. Like, I just love the fact that, you're looking fundamentally at the communication. That's where the coaching comes in, right? Opening up and figuring out why we have the relationship we have with money and why we behave the way we do. But not only are you helping people get financially healthier, but you're also helping them in their relationship as well, because communication is everything.
Absolutely. And then you just look at it and the budget is a form of communication. And most people don't see it that way. They look at it as there's this strict thing they have to follow and it has to be perfect. Communication is not perfect. It's messy. There's times it doesn't go to plan, but we don't just sit and shut our mouths the rest of our life and just accept it.
Yeah.
We go fight another day. But with money, we do, sometimes we have a tendency to do that. They're like, oh, I've made a mistake, so I'll just never be good with it and throw in the towel. It's like, no.
However, it happens, right? It actually happens where people throw in the towel because of money, and it ends up it ends up being like not such a positive experience, their marriage, their finances, and the marriage breaks down, but the finances don't get better either. So it's a lose-lose situation. And it sounds like you're looking for the win-win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. And yeah, it is. And then it's not just to break down the marriage. I mean, how expensive is a divorce? How expensive is it to lose, whatever percentage of your income your spouse brought in?
Yeah. So there's so much domino effect, ripple effect that's so negative when we don't just deal with what we need to deal with in the present. So tell me a little bit about your certification around financial coaching. I'm really interested in hearing about that.
Yeah. So I completed Financial Coach Master Training. It's from Ramsey Solutions, US-based company. And so that is the certification I took for my coaching.
That's awesome. And this is all the things that you've learned in the communication piece and figuring out what the root causes are with people's relationship with money.
Yep. And that's just from the coaching experience. Because as a coach, the more people you coach, the more you're like, I really like these situations. Maybe I can coach these, but they're not my cup of tea. And so, now that I've been doing this long enough, it's been refining and be like, yeah, this is where I want to be. And it's also an area I saw that was not very well served.
Okay.
And
in couples financial situation, you mean like that specifically, or financial coaching with couples, or?
Not, I wouldn't say not specifically financial coaching with couples, but a lot of the coaches I know that work with couples, they're always like, we look at the budget every session, we do all these things. And what I offer is, if we work on the mindset and the challenges on what's not working with the communication, my clients don't wait for me to be like, let's go through the budget. They get so excited and they'll just text me and be like, oh my gosh, we found a way to save $1,000 a month. They don't need me to sit there and go with them line by line through a budget, because they see how some of them see how it needs to be done. Now, that doesn't mean I can't do it. If they want that support, I absolutely will. But it allows me to, tailor everything closer to what they're looking for. And, we will review expenses, but I'm not going to spend my full session going line by line through a document either.
Okay. So tell my listeners a little bit about how they can find you, because I think this is important, right? And some of the, services that, specifically that you do. I mean, we've talked about coaching around finances, but okay, so I'm your ideal client. Why am I seeking you for help? And I think we've probably talked about that already, but where do I find you as well?
Yeah, so I am on Facebook and Instagram at Finance Coach AC. At Finance Coach AC. My website is carlsonfinancialcoaching.com/homepage. I'm on Alignable at Carlson Financial Coaching. And then the email is carlsonfinancialcoaching@hotmail.com.
Okay. And we'll make sure that we add all of those links in the podcast notes, so that when people hear this, they know where to find you, because I think this is an awesome perspective and different way for people to approach their finances. Like you said, and I think if it didn't land on the listeners already, is that, hey, you can get a budget from someone, but if you don't know why you're in the situation that you're in, or you don't know why you aren't able to stick to your budget, like all of that work can be very futile. Right. So I think as human beings, we need to be very aware of how our mindset, like how we're wired, why we behave the way we behave, so that we can address it long term, because you can get quick fixes. But if you don't deal with the inner workings of your mindset, those things can come back to bite you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So if you were going to, as an entrepreneur, right, because a big part of this podcast is to inspire other women as entrepreneurs, as business owners, to really just like be the CEO of their lives. What are like the top tips that you would give your fellow women in leadership out in my listening audience?
Yeah. So in terms of being CEO of my life, it's keeping my schedule and sticking to it, regardless of what my emotions are. That's a big one. It's also just reminding myself, why am I doing this every day? And just keep showing up with that.
I love that. Keep your schedule and remind yourself of your why every day. Do you have any specific tools that you use that help you do that on a consistent basis?
I mean, my calendar is like my most important tool right now. Like I will go in and block off my free time, my time with my family. I mean, you look at my calendar, it looks like I'm constantly booked. It's not that I'm constantly booked. I literally just have everything scheduled.
Okay. And then keeping promises to yourself, right? Like you said, if you make a commitment to yourself, like it's non-negotiable. And I think that's really important, because when we get in the messy stuff, the first thing to go is our promises to ourselves. So I love that you said that. And that has made you consistent. Like you said, consistently showing up, making sure that you are consistently active in your business and like leveraging your calendar. I love that. That's what high producers do, right? High performance people, they live and breathe by their calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, Angie, I want to thank you so much for being a very special guest on today's podcast. I think what you shared today was so deep because as entrepreneurs, as women in business, like our relationship with our finances is critical. I love that you were able to like go credit card free. I think that is like, we all aspire, right? And that we can live our lives without incurring debt and living in that lifestyle. And I think that is such an inspiration to everybody out there. So I just want to thank you for sharing that. And I want to thank you for serving your community as a financial coach and how you help all of those like lovely couples out there, like, you know, get their stuff together and live their best lives as well.
Oh, well, thank you, Wendy. I appreciate your kind words.
Well, thank you so much. So everyone, be sure to follow Angie at Carlson Financial Coaching. She's going to change your life. So don't wait. Now is the time. Have a great day, everyone. Peace and stay safe.
Bye.